Hi folks, in this video we're going to be talking about Sage. Sage is the theme that's a part of the Roots framework containing Trellis and Bedrock as well. Trellis being the provisioning mechanism that you can use to create your dev, your staging, and eventual production environments. Trellis has perfect parity, which means that if I'm on my development machine developing a WordPress website, I know that for sure when I deploy to my staging environment that it will have that perfect parity. All of the server settings will be exactly the same, regardless of whether or not it's just me or multiple people developing within that development environment or staging environment. I know that via something like Github or something like Bitbucket, all of my code, all of my changes will be merged properly and then deployed to a perfect parity server environment, letting me sleep at ease at night and not have to worry about that it worked on my machine. I'm not quite sure why it didn't work on your machine type of scenario. So Bedrock being the other component of the Roots framework, where it's going to pull out your WordPress install, put it into its own directory so that any of your, whether it be theme or plugin changes, those are separate in their own folder, agnostic of any WordPress updates or downgrades. So with that being said, those are the two of the three components within the Roots framework. The other component is the Sage theme. What I'm going to do is actually jump right over to roots.io to show you a visual example of this. Roots.io is the parent site where we have Trellis, Bedrock, which was previously discussed, and now the Sage WordPress theme, which in my opinion is by far the best theme that you can use for building a complete custom WordPress theme. So in a lot of cases, Sage might be not the greatest theme to start your career when it comes to WordPress development, but it's definitely where I feel like you should probably end it. And I say that because a lot of what we're going to be learning about Sage is a little advanced, and if you're new to WordPress development as a whole, it might be a little bit over your head to develop on Sage. But if you have a background using Laravel, Blade, if you have background using, Sass, and a various, amount of other different packages and languages programmatically, then you're probably okay to actually start, and you might actually grow to like WordPress a lot more coming from a different environment, whether it be a JavaScript app environment or something of that nature. Sage is very much aligned with the standard non-WordPress way type of thinking when it comes to app development. So Sage is the WordPress starter theme that I'd recommend developing WordPress websites on if your skill level allows for it out of the box. Advanced workflow, we use Bower, we use Bootstrap, HTML5 boilerplate, so you get all of those really nice shortcuts to take advantage of. A theme wrapper, which allows you to stay dry, as you can see they're saying here, which basically means don't repeat yourself. And it does that through a lot of references and a lot of routing. We'll talk more about that in a second. So let's jump over to the GitHub actually, so we can dive into this a little bit more. So the Roots Sage GitHub is going to contain a lot of the ins and outs of what exactly the Sage theme does and how it does it. Sass for style sheets, ES6 for JavaScript, Webpack, Browser Sync, Laravel, Blade Engine, which we'll talk a little bit about, but I'm going to record a separate video specifically about that. Controller for passing Blade data to Blade templates, CSS frameworks that you can easily install, Font Awesome, so that you don't have to use, if you're using Bootstrap, the glyphicon icons, you can instead use Font Awesome. Requirements, WordPress, PHP Composer, Node.js, and Yarn. I referenced the installation process for these and why these are important in a previous video. So if you haven't checked out those videos, definitely do. Everything from the Trellis, the Bedrock discussion that we just had, to the intro to Sage was discussed in a previous video. So definitely do go check that out. And even the installation of the theme itself has been discussed in a previous video, so please do check that out. So with that all being said, what I want to do is now dive into the general theme structure, the theme components, and how exactly Sage is going to save you a ton of time and make your life a lot easier in the long run once you get past that learning curve. So I'll jump over to my text editor here. I'm using Sublime. Within Sublime, you have a root folder structure that's going to look like this within the Roots framework. You have Site, you have Trellis. So we're going to be mainly working from Site, as we don't need to worry so much about Trellis. As of right now, we're just developing our theme. within that site directory, I'm going to jump over to iterm here and simply run the command yarn start, yarn run start. And what that's going to do is it's going to reference Webpack and compile and utilize all of my watching mechanisms. So in this case, we're going to be using our localhost 3000 server environment. Again, by using Trellis, we've used VirtualBox to spin up a local server on my machine so I can run this yarn command and have it watch all of my files. We want to do that because when we're working with Sass, we need that compiler to basically be compiling that code as we're writing it, so that we can see that we're on the right track as we're developing. So that might sound a little abstract, and I'll try to not make it so in a second here. So within web, you have your WordPress files as discussed previously, separate from all of your app files. Within your app folder, you have your theme. In this case, we have our breakfix theme. Within that breakfix theme, we have another app folder, lib, and then Sage. You have all of your Vue components. So everything from the template side of things is going to live within this section over here. And then everything from an assets standpoint is going to live, actually, I take that back. It's going to be resources view for all of your PHP templating components. And then within the assets folder is where you're going to see your styles. It's where you're going to see your images, your scripts, your fonts, things of that nature. What I want to first start on is the style side of things. So I'm going to expand each of these folders, and you can see here we have all of these .scss files. Now, you might be familiar with just standard CSS files. If that's the case, you're going to love Sass. Now, Sass is and can be found, well, let's just do CSS, at the sass-lang.com URL. You can learn more about it by visiting this URL, but the summary is that you can, in your CSS, now think a little bit more like a programmer and have a lot more control programmatically over your style sheets. And what I mean by that is you can do things like nested style sheets. So for instance, let's say we wanted to do a class of test, and we had our background color. We wanted that to be black. And now instead of us getting specific within that test container, which is going to have a background of black, instead of us doing something like this and then having our, let's say it was a paragraph. Inside of that, we had a paragraph class on one of our paragraphs, and then we wanted to make that paragraph text green. So color, let's just say green for now. We wanted to have that text be green, so we would do that. And over again, we would start to repeat things of that nature, where maybe then within that paragraph, we wanted to have the bold. So let's just do B. We wanted that bold to change color to red. And we'd have to keep repeating our CSS over and over again. We don't want to do that. Instead, what we want to do is simply do this. Paragraph. And then color green. And now within that paragraph, we just wanted that bold tag or element to be color red. And instead we would do that. So as you can see, a lot less typing, a lot less time going to be needed to, to make this cascaded and nested style sheet happen. We can get rid of all of that. And on top of that, you're going to, in the end, just have cleaner code. So test, paragraph, bold, all nested within each other. And what we're doing now is, if we were to save this, by having yarn running, we're compiling all of this code so that in our local host 3000, we're going to see that reflect as we go. So that in a nutshell is why I personally love using Sass, but there's also a number of various other things you can use, like mix-ins, like variables. As you can see here in this variables.sass file, we can create these variables that allow us just to use, string brand primary and then have our value listed off to the right-hand side. So in our code, instead of us repeating this over and over again, 27 AE 60, instead, if we wanted that color, we can just instead do that. And now it would know when I save this that my bold, and I might as well just start using some actual classes here within the Sage theme. So let's go ahead and target this H2. You see this H2 element here has a color which is defined apparently at the link level. So let's target our links. So let's say we only wanted our H2, which we wanted that H2 to have a specific color in general. And let's make that color our brand primary. Let's grab that, throw that in there. That's our H2. And now we wanted our links within the H2 nested color to again be, let's make it a brand secondary. Let's go ahead and copy that and just make that secondary. And we'll change this to black. And for consistency, use 6 characters, save it, and we'll jump over here, make that link secondary, save it. We got an issue here. And I guess this is a good time to actually talk about this. So what's really nice about Sage and using, yarn watch or yarn run start is that we're going to have the ability to, as we're editing our code and making our development changes, we're going to be able to immediately see if we have any sort of issues within our syntax. So in this case, we have invalid CSS after, and you can see color, color. So pretty straightforward. I just duplicated that color variable there, and let's just save it once more. And you can see now our text link has changed. So that green text that was there, because we've now used this color brand secondary, which we defined in this variable CSS Sass file, we can now see that that's been updated as we go. What's also really nice about Sass is that you're going to see is as I saved that file, I didn't have to refresh the browser at all. If I were to change this back to the primary variable, you can see hands off. It's automatically going to update that for us via Webpack and via browser sync. So a really nice, time-saving mechanism as we're going. It's really easy for us just to develop and instantly see our changes on the fly. So that is Sass. That's a little bit about how Sass works. That's a little bit about why variables can be a big time saver in the effort to not repeat yourself. And that's pretty much the gist of what Sass is and what I wanted to cover in this video. I also wanted to talk a little bit about how Sage does a really good job of keeping your Sass or your CSS files completely independent of one another and very organized. So you can see over here styles, common, we have our global styles, anything we wanted to affect our global development we would put there. Our variables, as we discussed previously, this is where we're storing all of these variables to reference in our Sass files. Buttons, so if we wanted to create specific button styles, we could do so in this file. Comments, forms, WP classes, this file specifically built to extend and build upon all of the standard WordPress classes. So that's really nice to have on handy. Footer, header classes, pages, post, sidebar, tiny MCE specific classes. If you wanted to edit the actual editor within WordPress, you would want to do that here. And then again, lastly, you have your main.sass file, and this is simply just referencing via the @import all of those specific Sass files that have been created as sub files within these folders within the styles folder. So as a whole, that is how you style your Sage theme. Huge time saver using Sass, and just a good idea to keep your code very clean and organized by using those folders. Now, just like the Sass mechanism, we also have built in that JavaScript lint mechanism, which is going to allow us to check our JavaScript. So if we're at any point we're developing and we're using JavaScript, what's really nice is that as soon as you are writing a new line of code, you're going to see on the front end if there was any error at all in your syntax. And not only errors in the sense that your code is just completely broken, but also errors that come in the form of warnings, basically saying that there's a better way of writing this JavaScript, which can be really, really handy. So let's jump over to scripts, and we'll talk about routes and talk about this main.js file first. So this main.js file is what eventually is going to be referenced by Sage when you're running your development processes here. And you can see within this, we have these routes, and it says all pages, common, home page, and about us. Now these routes are basically going to be referencing this routes folder where you have each of these JavaScript files broken down specifically into pages or specifically into common, which basically references all pages. So the reason this is really nice is that you can have JavaScript that you're writing for your home page that you don't want to be referenced for load time reasons on any other page. Now that can easily be done by just jumping over to that JavaScript home file. Within that home file, you have init and you have finalize. So Sage has easily broken out these two sections for us automatically, so we don't have to worry about any containers within our JavaScript to say, post or preload of all files. We can have that segmented out by the init in the finalize file, which is commented here to basically say JavaScript to be fired on the home page and JavaScript to be fired on the home page after the init.js. So this will be the JavaScript that fires immediately, and this will be the JavaScript that fires after everything else has already been loaded. So a really nice way to segment that JavaScript call. So within this home.js file, let's say that we wanted to simply target our body element here, and we wanted to say hide that body element. I'll save this file. The yarn watch that's going on here is automatically going to run. You can see body is not defined. Let's go ahead and fix that and put some quotes around it to target that correctly. Go back to our file here, and now you can see no more error. We can see that the entire page has been hidden, and that's just for the home page. So for instance, if I went to my sample page, you can see all of my text is being shown so that it knows specifically to not do that because it's only on the home page file because of this routing mechanism. So let's go ahead and save that. We'll jump back to our home page here. There we go. We have our text back, and just for finalization's sake, let's jump now to this common file. Do the exact same thing here, drop in that same JavaScript, close that, and you can see now, regardless of whether or not I'm on my home page or if I'm on my sample page here, you can see that entire body is now being hidden by that JavaScript. So a really nice way to hide, show, I don't know what I'm talking about in that moment, a really nice way to segment your JavaScript into these routes, and those routes can be defined here within this main.js file. This is where you're creating your references to your routes, and then within that routes folder, this is where you're actually creating those route files. So you're basically duplicating, let's say, either of these, and you're just naming them based on what you've called them here, so that those files can be referenced. And now what's really nice is as you create new pages within WordPress, if you're naming the routes based on those page slugs, then you're automatically all set. And this will automatically know that based on that page slug, that this will reference only that specific page when rendering your JavaScript. So a really beautiful way to render your JavaScript, your CSS. The last part of this video I'm going to talk about quickly is the Laravel Blade engine, Blade PHP engine system. And the reason why I'm going to talk about that quickly is because honestly, I'm still learning a bit about it, but I'll give you the overview of Blade. Blade is a beautiful shorthand version of both referencing and creating short syntactical PHP code. So with the roots framework, kind of methodology or principle being applied here, that dry, don't repeat yourself type of principle, the Blade templating engine is once more another way to do that through the use of these .blade.php files. So the .blade.php file is the actual extension here. So whenever you're dealing with a Blade template, you're going to want to make sure that you're naming that Blade template with that .blade.php extension. Now, what's really nice about Blade is that you're going to, just like within that CSS, be able to reference these different components, these partials as we're calling them here. So instead of us, let's say in our index file here, instead of us writing out all of this layouts.app section here, instead of us, adding all of that section content here, we're going to actually just be referencing these sections here within these partials. So I know that when I'm saying add section content, it's going to specifically add this code to those sections or extend or include that code to those specific sections within your Blade templating engine and your Blade templates. So again, I'm going to get a lot more into this in a completely separate video, so definitely do look for that video. Also, what you're going to see is that in general, you're not seeing a lot of else ifs and things of that nature here, and that's because we're doing these specific Blade syntactical calls here where we're saying if posts basically, and it knows automatically that we're saying that this is a PHP section, and we're saying that if this does not have posts, then to display this specific alert, so on and so forth. And again, you can see some shorthand here. : get search form false. So we're we're using a lot of syntactical shortcuts here within this Blade templating engine. So again, a separate video will be coming to talk more about that, just because I'm still kind of getting my feet wet a bit when it comes to this, so I don't want to misdirect anybody just for the sake of trying to do too much in one video. But as a whole, that is Sage. That is what you're going to be able to utilize within that Sage theme by using Sass, by using those segmented JavaScript and the JS hint, error detecting. That's what you're going to be able to do by using browser sync, so that your browser will automatically update without you having to hit refresh on the save of that specific file. And again, with Trellis and with Bedrock, that's how you can have this localhost 3000 local development environment set up with a VirtualBox server environment that has perfect parity with all of your other server environments, whether it be staging or production. So folks, let's stop all the cowboy coding. Let's use a proper WordPress workflow. Let's break a little bit of that WordPress way and do things in a way that is a little bit more user-friendly for the standard developer. That is all for now in this video. If you have any other questions for me, please feel free to leave any comments in the comments section of this video, and be on the lookout for additional videos on Blade and additional videos in general on Sage WordPress development. Thanks so much.